I'm Emily, 30 years old, and I've always been the responsible one in my family. My sister, Chloe, showed up at my door in tears, begging me to co-sign a $60,000 loan for her dream wedding. Despite my better judgment, I gave in to family pressure and signed those papers. What happened next still shocks me to this day. Have you ever had a family member take advantage of your kindness? Comment below if you've been in a similar situation. Before I continue my story, let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt pressured by family to make a bad financial decision. Growing up with Chloe was always challenging. From the moment she could talk, she knew exactly how to wrap our parents around her finger. Margaret and Richard, our parents, doted on her every whim while I was expected to be the sensible, self-sufficient daughter. Emily doesn't need as much attention, my mother would say. She's so independent. But that wasn't a choice I made. It was one forced upon me. By 16, I was working part-time at the local grocery store, saving every penny I could. I watched as Chloe got a brand new car for her 16th birthday while I took the bus to work and school. When I finally saved enough for my own used Honda, my father actually had the audacity to say, "See, Emily knows how to work for what she wants." As if denying me the same privileges was somehow building character. I put myself through college with scholarships, part-time jobs, and minimal student loans. Meanwhile, Chloe attended an expensive private university, changing her major 4 times before eventually dropping out with nothing to show for it except debt that our parents quietly paid off. After graduation, I secured a position as a financial analyst at Meridian Investments. The irony wasn't lost on me. I advised people on financial responsibility daily, while my family remained a case study in what not to do with money. I built an excellent credit score, established an emergency fund, and even started investing for retirement by 25. Chloe's financial history read like a cautionary tale. By 24, she had maxed out 3 credit cards, defaulted on a car loan, and borrowed money from our parents that mysteriously never got repaid. She drifted between retail jobs, never staying more than a few months before some drama inevitably led to her quitting or being fired. Then Justin entered the picture. Tall, charismatic, and with the same expensive taste as my sister, he swept Chloe off her feet with lavish dates and extravagant gifts. No one seemed to question how a part-time bartender afforded such luxuries. Their social media became a highlight reel of fancy restaurants, weekend getaways, and designer purchases. After just 4 months of dating, Justin proposed with a diamond ring that had to be at least 3 carats. Chloe called me screaming with excitement. "Emily, I'm getting married." Justin got me the most perfect ring. I congratulated her while mentally calculating how many months of salary that ring must have cost him. Their engagement party was held at one of the most expensive venues in town. When I cautiously asked Chloe how they were affording everything, she waved her hand dismissively. "Justin has connections. And anyway, we deserve this. Not everyone wants to live like a boring penny pincher." My best friend Natalie saw through it all. After meeting Justin and Chloe for dinner one night, she pulled me aside. "Emily, I don't want to overstep, but something feels off about this guy. And your sister seems to think money grows on trees." "Tell me something I don't know," I replied with a sigh. "But what can I do? She's an adult." "Just be careful," Natalie warned. "I have a feeling they're going to come asking for money soon, and knowing your family, they'll make you feel terrible if you say no." My boyfriend Michael expressed similar concerns. He'd witnessed firsthand how my family dynamics worked, having sat through several uncomfortable holiday dinners where my achievements were downplayed while Chloe's minimal efforts were celebrated. "Your parents enable her, he said one evening as I vented about Chloe's latest expensive purchase. "And they expect you to do the same. You need to establish boundaries before this wedding planning gets out of control." I nodded, knowing he was right. But setting boundaries with family who've never respected them is easier said than done. Deep down, I hoped that maybe, just maybe, Chloe would handle her wedding responsibly. That hope was about to be shattered in the most spectacular way. The knock on my apartment door came at 8:30 p.m. on a Tuesday. I was still in my work clothes, unwinding with a glass of wine and catching up on emails. Through the peephole, I saw Chloe's mascara-streaked face. "What's wrong?" I asked, swinging the door open. She collapsed into my arms, sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. I guided her to the couch, handed her a tissue, and waited for the crying to subside enough for coherent speech. "It's the wedding," she finally managed between hiccuping sobs. "The venue we want needs a 50% deposit by next week or we lose our date. And the caterer wants 30% up front." "Okay," I said cautiously. "How much have you and Justin saved for the wedding?" This triggered a fresh round of tears. "That's the problem. We don't have enough. The wedding planner says we need at least $60,000 for the kind of wedding we want. It's my dream wedding, Emily. The one I've been planning since we were kids." I vaguely remembered Chloe's childhood scrapbook of wedding dresses and flower arrangements, but I also remembered the reasonable price tags attached to those dreams.
$62,000.
I repeated, stunned. "Chloe, that's excessive. The average wedding costs around $30,000, and even that's a lot. But we want it at Lakeside Manor. And I found the perfect designer dress. And Justin has his heart set on a live band that played at his cousin's wedding." Her lower lip trembled. "I thought you'd understand. This is the most important day of my life." "I do understand wanting a special day," I said carefully. "But couldn't you scale back a little? Or postpone until you've saved more? We can't wait. We've already told everyone October 15th. And scaling back." She looked horrified. Amelia Barrett had swans at her wedding.
Actual swans.
I can't have a wedding that's less impressive than hers. I suppressed a sigh. Amelia Barrett was Chloe's high school rival, and apparently still a benchmark for success in my sister's mind. "So, what exactly are you asking me, Chloe?" She took a deep breath. "We applied for a wedding loan, but we got denied. My credit is still recovering from those stupid credit cards, and Justin's isn't much better. The bank said we need a cosigner with excellent credit." Her eyes, still wet with tears, fixed on mine with desperate hope. "You have perfect credit, Emily. The bank manager even mentioned how impressed he was when I told him you're my sister." My stomach dropped. "You want me to co-sign a $60,000 loan?" "You wouldn't have to pay anything," she rushed to assure me. "Justin and I will make all the payments. You'd just be signing to help us get approved." "Please, Emily. I've never asked you for anything this important before." That was technically true, though she'd asked for plenty of smaller loans over the years that were never repaid. "Chloe, co-signing is a huge responsibility. If you miss payments, my credit gets damaged. If you default, I'm legally responsible for the entire amount." "That won't happen. Justin just got promoted, and I'm up for assistant manager at the boutique. Plus, we'll get cash gifts at the wedding that will help pay it down faster." Her voice took on a manipulative edge I recognized from childhood. I guess I thought my sister would want me to have my perfect day. Mom and Dad would help if they could, but you know they don't have this kind of money. Before I could respond, my phone rang. My mother's name flashed on the screen. "Did Chloe talk to you?" she demanded without preamble when I answered. "She's here now, actually. So you'll help her, right? This wedding means everything to her, Emily." "Mom, it's $60,000. That's not a small favor. It's just a signature. You're not actually paying anything." My mother's voice turned cold. "I don't understand why you're being so selfish. Your sister has found the love of her life, and you're standing in the way of her happiness over some hypothetical risk." "It's not hypothetical. It's a legally binding financial obligation. Family helps family, Emily. Your father and I have always taught you girls that." Put Chloe back on the phone. I handed the phone to my tearful sister, who nodded and sniffled through whatever our mother was saying. When she hung up, her expression had changed from desperate to determined. "Mom and Dad want us all to have dinner tomorrow night, to discuss this as a family." The family dinner turned out to be an ambush. My parents had invited Justin along, and the three of them took turns explaining why I was being unreasonable. Justin talked about his promotion at the bar to night manager, how he had plans to open his own place someday. My father reminisced about how much he'd spent on their wedding, as if that justified Chloe's extravagance. My mother repeatedly used phrases like, if you really loved your sister, and that's what family does. By dessert, I felt cornered and exhausted. I need time to think about this, I insisted. And I want to talk to the bank directly. Chloe immediately brightened. I already set up a meeting. Tomorrow at 2 p.m. with Terrence Johnson. He's the loan officer. I told him you'd be there. The presumption irritated me, but I agreed to the meeting just to escape the dinner from hell. Terrence Johnson was a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a cautious demeanor. He explained the terms of the loan with far more clarity than Chloe had. So you understand, Ms. Miller, as co-signer you are equally responsible for this debt. If payments are missed, it affects your credit as well as the primary borrowers. If they default entirely, the bank will look to you for payment. And what happens if I need my own loan someday? Would this affect my borrowing power? Absolutely. This $60,000 will count toward your debt-to-income ratio for any future loans you might need, mortgage, car loan, anything. I felt a headache forming. And what's the interest rate? For a signature loan of this size with the primary borrower's credit history, we're looking at 12.8% APR over 5 years. I nearly choked. That's very high. Terrence nodded sympathetically. That's why we require a co-signer. Frankly, Ms. Miller, in my professional opinion, if someone needs a co-signer, it's usually because the bank has determined they cannot afford the loan on their own. I tell all potential co-signers to ask themselves if they're prepared to take on the debt entirely, because that's a real possibility. Walking out of the bank, I felt more conflicted than ever. Every financial principle I lived by and advised clients about screamed that this was a terrible idea. But the weight of family expectation and the fear of being labeled the villain in Chloe's wedding story pulled me in the opposite direction. I was trapped between financial wisdom and family pressure, with no clear way out. Absolutely not, Michael said that evening when I explained the situation. We were sitting on my couch, takeout containers spread across the coffee table. Emily, you know this is financial suicide. I know, I agreed, picking at my pad thai without appetite. But you didn't see how they all ganged up on me. My mom actually said I was ruining Chloe's life. Michael set down his fork. Your family has a talent for emotional manipulation. They're counting on you to cave, because you always have before. But this isn't borrowing $20 or letting Chloe crash on your couch after a breakup. This is $60,000. The loan officer made that very clear. I sighed. He practically begged me not to sign with his eyes.
Smart man, Michael kommentet.
So, what are you going to do? That was the question I'd been avoiding. What was I going to do? I spent the next morning researching wedding loans and co-signing horror stories. The internet was full of cautionary tales, broken families, ruined credit, financial devastation. But there were also stories of co-signers who'd put protections in place, legal agreements that provided some security. By lunchtime, I'd made a decision. I called Rachel Goldstein, an attorney a colleague had recommended. I need to protect myself while technically doing what my family wants, I explained after outlining the situation. Rachel adjusted her glasses thoughtfully. You have options. First, we can draft a legal agreement between you and your sister that outlines her responsibility to repay the loan, perhaps securing it with collateral if she has any. Second, we can look at the loan agreement itself to see if there are any provisions we can modify to protect you. Could we do both? I asked. Absolutely. But I have to warn you, if your sister has no intention of repaying this loan, these documents might only help you in court later. They won't prevent the initial damage to your credit or the stress of dealing with the bank. I understand. But having something is better than nothing, right? Rachel nodded. One more thing, start documenting everything. Record conversations if your state allows it. Keep texts, emails, anything that shows your sister's promises to repay. Armed with Rachel's advice, I texted Chloe. I'll co-sign under certain conditions. We need to meet and discuss. Her reply was instantaneous. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You're the best sister ever. Whatever you need. We met at a cafe the next day. I laid out my conditions, a legal agreement between us stating the loan was her responsibility, access to see if payments were being made, and a small piece of collateral. The diamond engagement ring could be held as security. Chloe's smile faltered slightly at the mention of collateral, but she quickly recovered. Of course, that all makes perfect sense. Justin and I have absolutely no problem signing whatever you need. We're going to make every payment on time, I promise. And I need to be involved in the loan process from start to finish. No paperwork gets signed without me reading it first. Totally reasonable. Chloe beamed. The bank already sent over the preliminary paperwork. We can go through it together right now if you want. We spent the next hour reviewing the loan documents. I insisted on several modifications. Payments would be automatically deducted from Chloe and Justin's joint account. I would receive notification of any missed payments, and there would be a clause allowing me to assume control of the loan under certain circumstances. Chloe agreed to everything with surprising ease, which should have been my first red flag. The day we went to the bank to sign the final papers, I felt a knot in my stomach. Terrence, the loan officer, gave me one last meaningful look as I signed my name on the dotted line. "Congratulations," he said without enthusiasm. "The funds will be available in the account tomorrow." As we walked out, Chloe was practically skipping. "This is really happening. I can't believe it. I'm going to call the wedding planner right now and secure everything." While she made her call, I discreetly slipped back inside to speak with Terrence privately. "I need a favor," I said quietly. "I know this isn't standard, but I'd like to set up some protections on this loan. If payments are missed, I want to be notified immediately, not after 30 days. And I'd like to explore what options I would have in worst-case scenarios." Terrence looked relieved that I was thinking ahead. "Actually, there are several things we can do." He outlined a plan that included early notifications and special provisions that could be activated if needed. "I'll make these notes in the system personally. And Ms. Miller, I hope your sister proves me wrong." "Me too," I replied, though my confidence was waning. In the weeks that followed, wedding planning consumed Chloe's life. The dream wedding kept expanding, more flowers, fancier invitations, an upgraded menu. Each time I cautiously asked about the budget, Chloe brushed off my concerns. "We're handling it. The loan covered the major expenses, and Justin's parents are chipping in for the honeymoon." But I noticed troubling signs. New designer clothes appeared in Chloe's wardrobe. Justin was suddenly driving a newer model car. When I visited their apartment, I spotted high-end electronics that hadn't been there before. I began to wonder, was the wedding loan funding more than just the wedding? My suspicions grew when I overheard Justin talking to his friend in the parking lot after a cake tasting. "Man, this wedding is the best thing that ever happened to us. Emily has no idea." His friend laughed. "Free money, right? Your future sister-in-law must be loaded. She's some kind of financial advisor or something. Super careful with money, which makes this even funnier." I ducked behind a car before they could spot me, my heart pounding. What had I gotten myself into? That night, I called Rachel to review our legal protections again, and I began recording every interaction with Chloe and Justin, just as she had advised. I also took one additional precaution. I made copies of all loan documents, agreements, and text messages, storing them both digitally and in a secure physical location. Something told me I would need them sooner rather than later. The morning of Chloe's wedding dawned bright and clear, perfect weather for the outdoor ceremony at Lakeside Manor. As promised, no expense had been spared. The garden was transformed with thousands of roses and lilies in Chloe's chosen colors of blush and gold. A string quartet played softly as guests arrived, many commenting on the champagne fountain and ice sculpture of intertwined swans. As a bridesmaid, I had a front row seat to the extravagance. My dress alone had cost $400, which Chloe insisted was totally reasonable despite being something I would never wear again. The other bridesmaids, mostly Chloe's friends from college and the boutique where she worked, were equally uncomfortable with the cost but too afraid of Chloe's legendary tantrums to object. "Is that caviar?" I whispered to Kimberly, the maid of honor, as waiters circulated with appetizers during the pre-ceremony photos. "Imported from Russia, apparently," Kimberly replied, adjusting her corsage. Justin insisted. Between you and me, they're spending money like it's going out of style. My stomach tightened. Do you know if they've been making big purchases outside of wedding stuff? Kimberly glanced around to make sure Chloe wasn't within earshot. Are you kidding? Designer clothes, a 75-inch TV, weekend trips to Vegas. Chloe keeps saying they got an unexpected windfall. I assumed it was family money or something. Before I could respond, the wedding planner herded us into position. The ceremony proceeded like a scene from a bridal magazine. Chloe gliding down the aisle in her $12,000 gown, Justin tearing up on cue, perfectly choreographed vows and ring exchange. I tried to feel happy for my sister, but all I could think about was the mounting evidence that the loan I'd co-signed was funding far more than this one day. The reception was even more ostentatious than the ceremony. The 5-course meal featured Wagyu beef and lobster. The cake, a 7-tier masterpiece, was cut with ceremonial flourish. The live band Chloe had mentioned was actually a well-known local group that typically played sold-out venues. As I nursed a glass of champagne at the bridal party table, I did mental calculations. This wedding had to be costing well over the $60,000 loan amount. Where was the extra money coming from? During the speeches, I watched as Chloe thanked their parents, Justin's family, the wedding party, and even the caterers. My name was noticeably absent despite my significant contribution to making the day possible. After dinner, I escaped to the restroom for a moment of peace. As I was fixing my makeup, Kimberly entered, slightly tipsy from the open bar. "Great speech," she said, leaning against the counter. "Though I was surprised Chloe didn't mention you, especially after everything you did." "What do you mean?" I asked carefully. Kimberly's eyes widened.
Oh.
"Nothing. I just meant, being her sister and all." "Kimberly," I said firmly, "what did Chloe tell you?" She looked uncomfortable. "It's probably just Chloe being Chloe. She mentioned something about you helping with the finances. I called you her sucker sister who'd do anything she asked. I thought it was a joke." The confirmation hit me like a physical blow, but I wasn't surprised. "It's fine," I assured her. "I know who my sister is." I rejoined the reception with a forced smile, watching Chloe and Justin dance, laugh, and celebrate without a care in the world. They were leaving the next morning for a 3-week honeymoon in Europe, another expense I now suspected was courtesy of the loan. 2 days after the wedding, I checked my bank's loan portal. The first payment was due in 30 days, but I wanted to make sure everything was set up correctly. To my alarm, the automatic payment option had been canceled. I immediately called Chloe, but the call went straight to voicemail. I tried Justin with the same result. A week passed with no response to my increasingly urgent messages. Finally, Chloe texted back. "On honeymoon. Signal spotty. Talk when we're back." I replied. "The automatic payment for the loan was canceled. It needs to be set up again before the first payment is due." 3 hours later. "Don't worry about it. Everything's handled. Enjoying Santorini. Look at this view." Attached was a photo of Chloe and Justin toasting with wine glasses on a private balcony overlooking the Mediterranean. The first payment date came and went. I received an alert from the bank. Payment missed. I tried calling Chloe again, this time leaving a voicemail explaining the situation and its seriousness. No response. When they finally returned from their honeymoon, I drove to their apartment, determined to have a face-to-face conversation. The complex manager informed me they had moved out 2 days before the wedding, leaving no forwarding address. I felt sick. This had been their plan all along. It took 3 more days to track them down through a mutual friend. They had rented a luxury condo across town, the kind with a doorman and rooftop pool. When I arrived unannounced, the look on Chloe's face confirmed everything.
"Emily."
"What a surprise," she said, not quite meeting my eyes as she reluctantly invited me in. The condo was filled with new furniture, artwork, and electronics. Shopping bags from high-end stores sat in corners. This was where the loan money had gone. "The first payment was missed," I said without preamble. "The bank contacted me." "Oh, that." Chloe waved dismissively. "We're just getting settled after the honeymoon." We'll catch up next month. That's not how loans work, Chloe. Missing payments damages both our credit scores. And why did you cancel the automatic payments we set up? Justin emerged from the bedroom, looking annoyed rather than concerned. Look, Emily, we appreciate what you did, but you need to relax. Consider it a wedding gift. A gift, I repeated incredulously. I didn't give you $60,000. I co-signed a loan that you promised to repay. Chloe exchanged a glance with Justin before turning back to me with a sickly sweet smile. And we're really grateful. But things are tight right now with the move and all our honeymoon expenses. Maybe in a few months we can start making payments. You spent the loan money on the honeymoon? And this condo? I gestured around at their lavish, new home. That wasn't what the loan was for. Money is fungible, Justin said with a smirk, using a financial term incorrectly, as if to mock me. Once it's in the account, it's all the same. Chloe put a hand on my arm. Thanks for the gift, sis. We really do appreciate it. But we need to finish unpacking now. As they ushered me out the door, the reality hit me fully. They had never intended to repay the loan. They had manipulated me, lied to me, and now expected me to quietly accept financial responsibility for their extravagance. The next day, I received a notification from the credit monitoring service I'd set up. My score had dropped 42 points due to the missed payment. This was just the beginning of what promised to be a financial nightmare. But little did Chloe and Justin know, I wasn't as naive as they thought. It was time to activate the contingency plan I'd put in place from the very beginning. To anyone looking at me from the outside, I appeared to be in full panic mode. I made frantic calls to Chloe that went unanswered. I sent desperate texts begging her to at least talk to me about the loan situation. I even called my parents, who predictably took Chloe's side. They just got married, Emily, my mother said dismissively. Give them time to settle in. I'm sure they'll start making payments eventually. Eventually isn't good enough, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. My credit score is already dropping. It's just a number, my father chimed in from the extension. Family is more important than some credit score. After hanging up, I sat at my kitchen table and took a deep breath. Then I called the one person who knew the full truth, Rachel Goldstein. They've stopped making payments and essentially admitted they never planned to pay it back, I explained. It's time to move forward with our plan. Rachel's voice was calm and professional. Are you certain? Once we initiate this, there's no going back. Your relationship with your sister will likely never be the same. I'm certain. They're counting on me caving like I always have before. They think I'll either make the payments myself or ruin my credit trying to force them to pay. They have no idea what's coming. All right then. Let's meet at my office tomorrow morning. Bring all the documentation we discussed. The next day, I arrived at Rachel's office with a thick folder of evidence. As I spread the contents across her conference table, she looked impressed. You really were thorough. I had to be, I replied. I knew from the beginning this might happen. What Chloe and Justin didn't know, what even my parents didn't know, was that I had never actually been the naive, trusting sister they all thought I was. From the moment Chloe asked me to co-sign, I had suspected her true intentions and prepared accordingly. First, there was the legal agreement Rachel had drafted between Chloe and me, stating explicitly that the loan was solely for wedding expenses and that Chloe was responsible for all payments. Chloe had signed it without reading it carefully, too eager to get her hands on the money. Second, the loan agreement itself contained special provisions I had insisted on, provisions Chloe had again agreed to without truly understanding their implications. These included a clause that allowed the bank to audit how the money was spent if payments were missed, the ability to transfer primary responsibility to the co-signer, me, under certain conditions, an acceleration clause that could make the entire loan amount due immediately if fraud was detected. Third, I had documented everything. I had recordings of Chloe promising to make payments, legal in our state with one-party consent. I had text messages showing the same. I had photographs of their new purchases and their luxury condo. I even had the statement from Kimberly about Chloe calling me her sucker sister. The key is the fraud angle, Rachel explained as she reviewed the documents. They took out a loan explicitly for wedding expenses, then used a significant portion for personal purchases and lifestyle inflation. That's loan fraud, and it activates several of our protective clauses. So, what happens now? I asked. First, I contact the bank and present our evidence. Then we file a formal complaint alleging fraud. Based on the documentation you've provided and the clauses in your loan agreement, the bank should transfer primary control of the loan to you. And then, as the primary controller of the loan, you can take legal action against Chloe and Justin for the full amount. With the evidence of fraud, the court is likely to rule in your favor. I nodded slowly. Will this fix my credit score? We can request that the bank remove the late payment from your credit report once fraud is established. I can't promise they will, but it's worth trying. I took a deep breath. Let's do it. Over the next week, Rachel set the plan in motion. She contacted Terrence Johnson at the bank, who remembered me well and was not surprised by the turn of events. Terrence reviewed our evidence and agreed that there was sufficient cause to suspect fraud. The audit provision allows us to request documentation of how the loan funds were spent, he explained during our conference call. Given what you've shown me, I don't think they'll be able to prove the money went primarily to wedding expenses. My parents called soon after, furious. Chloe had apparently contacted them in tears, claiming I was attacking her over a simple missed payment. What is wrong with you? My mother demanded. Why would you involve lawyers and bankers over one late payment? She just got married, for heaven's sake. It's not about one missed payment, I replied calmly. It's about the fact that they never intended to make any payments. They admitted it to my face, Mom. They called it a gift. So, what if they're a little behind? That's no reason to destroy your relationship with your sister. Chloe destroyed our relationship when she decided to commit fraud. There was a shocked silence on the other end of the line. Then my father's voice. Fraud? That's a serious accusation, Emily. It is. And I have the evidence to back it up. They used that loan for their honeymoon, new furniture, designer clothes, everything but catching up on the payments they promised to make. We're coming over, my mother declared. This needs to be discussed in person. An hour later, my parents sat stiffly on my couch as I laid out the timeline of events and the evidence I'd gathered. Their expressions shifted from disbelief to concern as the truth became undeniable. Why didn't you tell us you suspected this from the beginning? My father asked, his voice subdued. Would you have believed me over Chloe? I countered. You never have before. The uncomfortable silence that followed was answer enough. My mother's eyes filled with tears. What happens now? Will Chloe go to jail? That's unlikely, I assured her. This isn't a criminal case unless the bank decides to press charges, which they rarely do. But she and Justin will be legally responsible for repaying the entire loan amount, plus potential penalties and legal fees. This will ruin them financially, my father murmured. They ruin themselves, I corrected gently. I gave them every opportunity to do the right thing. I even warned them explicitly about the consequences of defaulting. As my parents left, visibly shaken by the revelations, I felt a strange mix of vindication and sadness. I had protected myself financially, but the family dynamics I'd grown up with were forever altered. Whether that was for better or worse remained to be seen. The next morning, Chloe finally called me back, her voice tight with anger and fear. What have you done? Some bank investigator called asking for receipts and wedding expense documentation. I'm protecting myself, I replied evenly. Which is exactly what I told you I would do if you defaulted on the loan. We didn't default. We just missed one payment. You told me to my face that you considered it a gift and had no intention of making payments. That was a joke. God, Emily, when did you become so uptight about money? It's like you love your precious credit score more than your own sister. This isn't about money, Chloe. It's about respect and keeping your word. You lied to me from the beginning. Her voice turned pleading. Please, Emily, call off the bank people. We'll start making payments, I promise. It's too late for promises. The audit is already underway. As I hung up, I knew the real storm was just beginning. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't backing down from my sister's manipulations. The tables had turned, and she was about to learn that actions have consequences. 3 days after my conversation with Chloe, the bank completed its preliminary audit. The results were exactly what I had expected. Less than 40% of the loan had gone toward actual wedding expenses. The rest had funded Chloe and Justin's honeymoon, new furniture, electronics, clothing, and the security deposit on their luxury condo. Terrence Johnson called me personally with the findings. Ms. Miller, based on our investigation and the provisions in your loan agreement, we're initiating the fraud protocols. The primary responsibility for the loan will be transferred to you as requested, giving you legal standing to pursue reimbursement from the other parties. Thank you, Terrence. What about my credit score? We'll remove the late payment notation from your credit report. It may take 30 to 60 days to reflect in your score, but it will be corrected. Just as we were wrapping up the call, my phone beeped with an incoming call. Chloe again.
I switched over.
Emily. She screamed, hysteria evident in her voice. The bank just called us. They're saying something about fraud and demanding immediate payment of the entire loan amount. What did you do? I didn't do anything, Chloe. You committed loan fraud. The bank is responding accordingly.
Fraud?
Are you insane? It was a wedding loan. Yes, for wedding expenses. Not for a 3-week European honeymoon or a 75-inch TV or designer clothes. There was a moment of stunned silence before Chloe's voice returned, now dangerously quiet. You've been spying on us. No, I've been protecting myself from exactly this situation. I knew from the beginning you had no intention of repaying that loan. So this was all a trap? You agreed to co-sign, knowing you'd do this to us. I agreed to co-sign, hoping I was wrong about you. I wasn't. Chloe exploded. You ruined everything. The bank froze our accounts. They're threatening to sue us. Justin is freaking out. Maybe you should have thought about consequences before spending $60,000 of borrowed money on luxuries. We can't pay it all back at once. It's impossible. You should have considered that before defaulting on the very first payment. The acceleration clause was triggered by your actions, not mine. I could hear Justin shouting in the background. Chloe's voice became muffled as she presumably covered the phone to speak with him. When she returned, her tone had changed to one of desperate bargaining. Look, we'll start making payments. Double payments. Just call off the bank. It's out of my hands now, Chloe. The bank has initiated their fraud protocols. Please, Emily. We're family. The irony of her suddenly remembering the importance of family wasn't lost on me. Yes, we are. And family doesn't exploit family. You took advantage of me, lied to me, and expected me to either pay your debt or destroy my financial future. Those aren't the actions of someone who cares about family. Chloe began sobbing. What are we supposed to do now? You might want to start by calling a lawyer, I suggested before ending the call. Within hours, my parents arrived at my door unannounced. My mother was in tears, my father grim-faced. Chloe says you're trying to destroy her life. My mother accused as soon as I let them in. I'm holding her accountable for her actions. I corrected. There's a difference. She's your sister. Yes, and she committed fraud. Against me, her sister. My father intervened. Emily, we understand you're upset about the missed payment, but this seems extreme. I invited them to sit down and once again walked them through the evidence. The text messages, the recordings, the photographs of luxury purchases, the audit results showing misuse of funds. As the reality sank in, my father's expression shifted from disapproval to disappointment, not in me, but in Chloe. I had no idea it was this bad, he admitted. We thought it was just one missed payment, and you were overreacting. That's what Chloe wanted you to believe, I said gently. She's been manipulating all of us for years. The difference is, this time I was prepared for it. My mother wiped her eyes. What happens now? Chloe and Justin have a few options. They can try to secure another loan to pay off this one. They can sell their new possessions to raise funds, or they can face legal consequences and potential wage garnishment. This will devastate them financially, my mother whispered. Yes, I agreed. But it was their choice. I gave them every opportunity to do the right thing. As my parents left, visibly shaken by the extent of Chloe's deception, I felt a strange mixture of vindication and sadness. This wasn't how I had wanted things to play out, but perhaps it was necessary, not just for my financial protection, but for Chloe to finally face consequences for her actions. The next day, Justin called. His normally confident voice was tight with panic. "Emily, you need to call this off. They're talking about garnishing our wages, putting liens on our property. This could follow us for years." Yes, it could. Just like the debt would have followed me if I'd let you two default. We made a mistake, okay? We got carried away. But this punishment doesn't fit the crime. It's not punishment, Justin. It's consequence. There's a difference. Look, we can't pay back $60,000 all at once. It's impossible. I know. That's why Rachel, my lawyer, is prepared to discuss a repayment plan. One with legally binding terms and real collateral, not just empty promises. There was a long pause. What kind of repayment plan? You and Chloe meet with me and Rachel tomorrow at her office. We'll discuss the details then. After hanging up, I received a notification that Chloe had posted on social media about being betrayed by family and how some people care more about money than love. The comments were filled with sympathetic responses from friends who had only heard her side of the story. I didn't respond publicly. Instead, I focused on preparing for the meeting with Rachel, making sure we had a reasonable but firm repayment plan to propose. Chloe and Justin arrived at Rachel's office, looking like they hadn't slept in days. Chloe had none of her usual designer accessories, and Justin's typically perfectly styled hair was disheveled. Rachel laid out the terms clearly. They would make substantial monthly payments on a strict schedule. They would provide collateral, including Chloe's engagement ring and Justin's new car. They would agree to financial monitoring until the debt was paid in full. And they would sign a legally binding document acknowledging the fraud and accepting responsibility. "This is humiliating," Chloe muttered, staring at the paperwork. "No," I corrected her. "It's accountability. And if we refuse?" Justin challenged. Rachel's smile was professionally polite but cold. "Then Ms. Miller will pursue legal action for the full amount plus damages. Given the evidence, it's a case we would almost certainly win. Additionally, the bank may decide to press criminal charges for loan fraud, which could result in significant legal problems beyond the financial implications." The color drained from both their faces. "You wouldn't let that happen," Chloe said to me, her voice small. "I'm your sister. I gave you multiple chances to do the right thing, Chloe. You chose to take advantage of me instead. Now we do this my way." As they reluctantly signed the agreement, I felt no joy in their defeat, only relief that the situation was being resolved and a faint hope that perhaps this would be a turning point for Chloe. That hope was tested the very next day when Chloe's social media exploded with a lengthy post detailing her version of events, a heavily edited account that painted her as the victim of a cold-hearted sister who cared more about money than family. Friends and acquaintances flooded the comments with support for her and condemnation of me. I didn't respond online. Instead, I forwarded the post to Rachel, who promptly sent Chloe a cease and desist letter warning that public defamation could violate the terms of our agreement and result in acceleration of the payment schedule. The post was deleted within hours. As word spread through our extended family and social circle about what had really happened, opinions began to shift. Several relatives reached out to express their support for me and disappointment in Chloe. Even my parents, after the initial shock wore off, began to acknowledge that their years of enabling Chloe had contributed to the situation. The first payment under the new agreement came due 2 weeks later. I watched my account carefully that day, half expecting another default. To my surprise, the payment arrived on time, the first small step in what would be a long road to resolution. 6 months after the confrontation at Rachel's office, much had changed. Chloe and Justin had downsized from their luxury condo to a modest apartment. They'd sold many of their extravagant purchases to help meet the payment schedule. Most importantly, they hadn't missed a single payment under the new agreement. My credit score had recovered completely. actually climbing higher than before due to some other positive financial moves I'd made. Terrence Johnson at the bank had been true to his word, removing the late payment notation and ensuring my credit history reflected the loan situation accurately. But the most significant changes weren't financial, they were relational. My parents had gone through a profound shift in their understanding of family dynamics. After several difficult conversations and even a few sessions with a family therapist, they began to recognize how their different treatment of Chloe and me had fostered unhealthy patterns. "We thought we were helping her," my mother admitted during a quiet dinner at their house. "But we were just teaching her that she could get away with anything, that there would always be someone to bail her out." My father nodded solemnly. "And we put unfair pressure on you, Emily. Expected you to be the responsible one while letting Chloe off the hook. I'm sorry we didn't see it sooner." Those words, that acknowledgement, meant more to me than any financial resolution could have. Michael and I had grown closer through the ordeal. He had stood by me when I was wavering under family pressure and supported my decision to hold Chloe accountable. Our relationship had deepened, built on a foundation of mutual respect and shared values. "I'm proud of you," he told me one evening as we walked along the riverfront. Not many people would have had the courage to stand up to their family like that, or the foresight to protect themselves. "I just wish it hadn't been necessary," I replied, watching the sunset reflect on the water. "I wish Chloe had been the person I wanted to believe she was." "People can change," he reminded me. "Sometimes they just need the right motivation." As if to prove his point, Chloe reached out to me a week later, asking if we could meet for coffee. I agreed with cautious optimism. She arrived at the cafe on time, a small but notable change from her usual 20 minutes late entrance. She looked different. Simpler clothes, less makeup, a certain humility in her posture that had never been there before. "Thank you for meeting me," she began, fidgeting with her cup. "I've been wanting to talk to you, but I wasn't sure you'd want to hear from me." "I'm listening," I said, neither warm nor cold. Chloe took a deep breath. "I owe you an apology. A real one, not just because I got caught or because I need something from you." She met my eyes directly. "I'm sorry, Emily. What Justin and I did was wrong. We used you, lied to you, and then expected you to just accept it. It was selfish and cruel, and you didn't deserve it." I studied her face, looking for signs of the manipulation I'd grown so accustomed to. Instead, I saw genuine remorse. "What brought this on?" I asked. "Therapy," she admitted with a small smile. "Part of our agreement was financial counseling, remember? But the counselor suggested I might benefit from regular therapy too. She helped me see patterns I never recognized before, how I've been using people, especially you, my whole life. And Justin, we're working on things. The financial stress has been hard on our marriage, but we're in counseling together too. He's taking responsibility for his part in all this." I nodded, processing this information. "I appreciate the apology, Chloe, but trust takes time to rebuild." "I know," she said quickly. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away, or maybe ever. But I wanted you to know that I understand what I did wrong, and I'm trying to change." "That's a good start," I acknowledged. "There's something else," Chloe continued. "I want to make things right, not just with the payments, but with us. I was thinking maybe if you're willing, you could help me learn to be better with money. Like, actually teach me instead of just bailing me out." The request surprised me. "You want financial advice from me? After everything that happened?" "Especially after everything that happened," she corrected. "You were right all along. I need to learn responsibility, not just of consequences forced on me." After considering her request, I proposed a condition. "There's a financial literacy course at the community college. Take that first, show me you're serious, and then we can talk about personal coaching." Chloe agreed without hesitation. For the first time in our adult lives, it felt like we were having an honest conversation instead of playing the roles we'd been assigned since childhood. Over the following months, Chloe followed through. She completed the financial literacy course, maintained perfect payment history on the loan, and gradually began rebuilding her life on a more realistic foundation. Our relationship slowly healed, not back to what it had been, but towards something potentially healthier. My relationship with Michael continued to flourish. On a weekend getaway to celebrate our third anniversary, he proposed, with a ring I knew was within his budget and perfectly aligned with the financial values we shared. As for me, the experience had transformed my approach to helping others. I started a blog sharing financial wisdom specifically tailored to family dynamics and emotional manipulation around money. I spoke at community events about setting healthy financial boundaries. I even began offering consultations to people facing situations similar to mine. The loan repayment continued steadily. Each on-time payment represented not just financial restitution but a step toward rebuilding trust that had been broken. There would be no shortcuts to healing our family relationships, just as there had been no shortcuts to financial responsibility. Looking back on that fateful day, when Chloe appeared at my door asking me to co-sign the loan, I realized that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is not to give them what they want, but to hold them accountable for what they need. And sometimes, the boundaries you set to protect yourself end up protecting everyone else too, even if they don't see it at first. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision to hold a loved one accountable? Or have you learned lessons about setting financial boundaries with family? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if you found my story helpful, subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories, and share with anyone who might be struggling with similar family financial pressures. Remember, setting healthy boundaries isn't selfish. It's an act of self-care that can ultimately lead to healthier relationships for everyone involved. Thank you for watching, and I wish you strength and wisdom in your own financial journey. My name is Madison Reynolds, 27, and I still remember that phone call like it was yesterday. I sold your house to teach you a lesson about respect, my stepmother Brenda sneered over the phone. The new owners move in next week. My hand didn't even tremble as I held the receiver. I smiled, remembering the secret meeting with my late father's lawyer. Good luck with that, I replied simply. She had absolutely no idea what was coming. Dad had made sure of that before cancer took him from us last year. Before I dive into this wild family drama, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below, hit that like button, and subscribe to hear more stories about family justice that will leave you speechless. The house at the center of this story wasn't just any house. It was a stunning Victorian in Boston's historic Beacon Hill neighborhood, all red brick, black shutters, and ornate moldings that dated back to 1887. My grandparents had purchased it in the 1950s for what now seems like an unbelievable price, and they'd left it to my father, their only child. That house had been the backdrop for every significant memory of my childhood. Dad was an architect with his own successful firm, and he taught me to appreciate every inch of that home's craftsmanship. On Sunday mornings, while most kids were watching cartoons, Dad would walk me through different rooms, pointing out the hand-carved balusters on the staircase, the original heart pine floors, and the intricate plasterwork on the ceilings. Madison, he'd say, running his fingers along the crown molding, they don't make homes like this anymore. This craftsmanship is a lost art. He'd lift me up to touch the ceiling medallions, explaining how they were created by artisans who had immigrated from Italy. This house is our legacy, Maddie. Someday it'll be yours to care for. My mother, Elizabeth, loved that house just as much as Dad did. She'd been an interior designer with an eye for blending modern comfort with historical integrity. Together, my parents had created spaces that were both breathtaking and livable. The jewel-toned library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. The kitchen with its soapstone counters and chef-grade appliances tucked discreetly behind period-appropriate cabinetry. The sunroom where Mom had nursed her collection of rare orchids. But our perfect life fractured when Mom was diagnosed with aggressive breast cancer when I was 13. For 2 years, our home transformed into a place of hushed conversations and medical equipment. The sunroom became Mom's sanctuary during treatment, where she could still feel the warmth of the sun when she was too weak to go outside. I was 15 when we lost her. Dad and I were devastated in different ways. I became withdrawn, spending hours in my room or in Mom's sunroom, talking to her plants as if they could hear me. Dad threw himself into work, sometimes sleeping at his office rather than coming home to a house filled with Mom's absence. For nearly 2 years, it was just the two of us, muddling through our grief together. Then came the charity gala for cancer research. Dad went to honor Mom's memory, and that's where he met Brenda Campbell. Brenda was everything my mother wasn't: loud, flashy, and attention-seeking. Where my mother had been thoughtful and genuine, Brenda was calculated and performative. But she made Dad laugh for the first time in years, and I couldn't begrudge him that, even when she started showing up at our house for dinner 3 times a week. "Be nice to Brenda," Dad would say before she arrived. "She makes me happy, Maddie." So I tried. I genuinely tried. But from the beginning, Brenda made it clear that our house wasn't to her taste. "This place is so old," she'd say, running a manicured finger along our antique sideboard. "Wouldn't it be nice to update things? Get rid of some of this dark wood. Brighten the place up." Each suggestion felt like an erasure of my mother. The dated wallpaper in the dining room that Mom had carefully selected. The old-fashioned clawfoot tub that Mom and I used to take bubble baths in when I was little. The cluttered bookshelves filled with volumes that contained my mother's notes in the margins. When Dad announced their engagement after only 8 months of dating, I forced a smile and congratulated them. I was 17 then, and I told myself I only needed to endure Brenda for 1 year before college would provide me an escape. The wedding was lavish, Brenda's choice, not Dad's. He would have preferred something intimate, like his first wedding to my mother in our backyard garden. Instead, we had a 200-person extravaganza at one of Boston's premium hotels. I stood beside them as the maid of honor, watching as Brenda beamed at the photographer rather than at my father during their vows. After the honeymoon, things changed rapidly. Brenda began redecorating immediately. Room by room, my mother's touch disappeared from our home. The antique Persian rugs were replaced with modern geometric patterns. The warm colors gave way to stark whites and grays. Family photos were rearranged to prominently feature Brenda, with many of the ones featuring just Dad and Mom and me disappearing altogether. Dad seemed oblivious at first, or perhaps he was just grateful not to be alone anymore. When I tried to talk to him about it, he'd brush off my concerns. "Your mother would want us to move forward, Maddie," he'd say. "Brenda needs to feel like this is her home too." But it went beyond redecorating. Brenda began inserting herself between Dad and his longtime friends. The couples that had been fixtures at our dinner table for years were suddenly too boring or stuck in the past. Dad's college roommate who visited every summer was now imposing. His sister, my Aunt Carol, was always criticizing Brenda, though I'd never heard Aunt Carol say an unkind word about anyone. Gradually, our social circle shrank to Brenda's friends and colleagues. Dad seemed to shrink too, deferring to Brenda on matters he once would have decided confidently on his own. By the time I left for college at UCLA, as far from Boston as I could reasonably go, Dad was calling me less frequently, always when Brenda was out. Our conversations felt rushed and guarded. When I'd ask about coming home for a weekend, there was always some reason why it wasn't a good time. Brenda was hosting a work event. Brenda was remodeling the guest room. Brenda thought it would be better if I visited during scheduled breaks when they could properly prepare. So I adapted. I spent holidays with friends or with Aunt Carol, who had been similarly exiled. I focused on my studies, double majoring in architecture and historic preservation, a tribute to both my parents that went unrecognized by my father. Still, Dad found ways to maintain our connection. He'd send care packages to my dorm with notes saying, "Don't tell Brenda how much chocolate I sent." He'd make business trips to California that conveniently coincided with my semester breaks. During these stolen moments, I'd catch glimpses of my real father, the one who laughed easily and spoke passionately about his projects, the one who wasn't constantly checking his phone to respond to Brenda's texts. During my senior year of college, Dad surprised me by flying out for a weekend, alone. "Brenda thinks I'm at a conference in Chicago," he confessed as we walked along the Santa Monica Pier. "I needed to see you, Maddie. To talk to you without interference." That day, he asked detailed questions about my life, my studies, my goals after graduation. He seemed particularly interested in my thesis project on adaptive reuse of historic properties. "You have your mother's eye and my technical mind," he said proudly. The perfect combination. Before he left, he hugged me tighter than usual. "I've made some mistakes, Madison," he said, using my full name as he always did when he was serious. "But I want you to know that you are the most important person in my life." Never doubt that. I didn't know then that he was saying goodbye in his way. I didn't know that he'd already received his diagnosis. The call came on a Tuesday morning during my first year working at a historic preservation firm in San Francisco. Aunt Carol's voice was tight with both grief and anger. "Your father's sick, Madison. It's cancer, pancreatic, and it's advanced. The doctors are giving him months, not years." The shock hit me physically, making my knees buckle as I sat heavily in my office chair. How long has he known? At least 6 weeks, from what I can gather. Brenda's been controlling who gets information and when. I only found out because I ran into James from your dad's firm. I was on a plane that afternoon. During the 5-hour flight, my mind raced through all the signs I might have missed. Dad had looked thinner when we video chatted last month. He'd seemed tired, but I'd attributed that to a big project he was finishing. He'd mentioned stomach pain, but blamed it on Brenda's experimental cooking phase. When I arrived at the house, my house, our house, though it hardly looked the same anymore, Brenda answered the door with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Madison, what a surprise," she said, blocking the entrance slightly. "We weren't expecting you." "I came as soon as I heard about Dad," I said, refusing to play along with her charade. "Where is he?" "Your father is resting. The medication makes him very tired. Perhaps you should have called first." From behind her, I heard Dad's voice, weak but insistent. "Is that Maddie?" "Let her in, Brenda." She stepped aside reluctantly, and I rushed past her to the downstairs study, which had been converted to a bedroom for Dad. The sight of him nearly broke me. The robust, energetic man who had taught me to ride a bike and build model bridges was now thin and jaundiced, his designer clothes hanging loose on his frame. But his eyes lit up when he saw me, and for a moment, he was just my dad again. "Madison," he said, reaching for me. "My girl. You came." I sat beside him, taking his hand carefully, afraid of dislodging the 4 that ran to a port in his chest. "Of course I came. Why didn't you tell me sooner?" He glanced toward the door where Brenda hovered. "We didn't want to worry you until we had a treatment plan in place." I bit back my response. There was no we in this situation. I knew with absolute certainty that Brenda had kept this from me deliberately, likely hoping Dad would be too sick to see me by the time I found out. Over the next few weeks, I took a leave of absence from my job and moved back into my old bedroom, which Brenda had thankfully not yet converted to the home gym she'd been planning. I coordinated with Dad's doctors, arranged for a home health nurse, and spent every possible moment with him. Brenda was visibly annoyed by my presence, but couldn't object without seeming heartless. Instead, she found subtle ways to assert her control, rescheduling nurse visits without telling me, accidentally discarding the soft foods I prepared for Dad, insisting on accompanying him to appointments where she would speak over both of us. But she couldn't be there all the time. She had her real estate business to run and social obligations she deemed too important to miss despite my father's condition. During these precious hours alone with Dad, we reconnected in a way we hadn't been able to in years. "I'm sorry, Maddie," he told me one afternoon as we looked through old family albums I'd rescued from the attic. I let her come between us. Between me and everyone who mattered. "It's okay, Dad," I said, though we both knew it wasn't. "No, it's not." I was weak. After your mother died, I was so lost. Brenda was decisive when I couldn't be, strong when I felt broken. But that strength, it became a wall. I see that now. On days when he felt stronger, Dad would ask me to help him to the sunroom, the one space Brenda hadn't completely redesigned, perhaps because she rarely used it. There, surrounded by the offspring of my mother's beloved plants that the housekeeper had quietly continued to tend, Dad began to have mysterious private conversations with me. "I need you to understand something, Madison," he said one day, his voice barely above a whisper. "Things aren't always what they seem. I've made arrangements to make things right." "What kind of arrangements, Dad?" I asked, but he shook his head. "Not now. After. I need you to promise me you'll meet with Harrison, my attorney, after I'm gone. No matter what happens at the reading of the will. Promise me." "I promise," I said, confused but unwilling to stress him by pressing for details. As the weeks passed and Dad grew weaker, I noticed Brenda's attention shifting from his care to his possessions. She began asking him pointed questions about his business, about accounts and properties. She became particularly fixated on the house. "We should discuss selling, Richard," she said one evening when she thought I was out of earshot. "This place is too big for me to manage alone. Too many stairs, too much maintenance. We could use the money for your treatments." Dad's insurance covered his treatments, and they both knew it. The house was worth millions in Boston's hot real estate market, and Brenda, who'd come into the marriage with comparatively modest assets, clearly had her eye on the potential windfall. "Not yet," Dad would reply weakly. "Let's focus on getting better first." But we all knew he wasn't getting better. The treatments had failed to shrink the tumors, and Dad had decided to stop them, preferring quality of life over a slightly prolonged, painful existence. During his final week, Dad insisted on speaking to me alone each day. These conversations were often fragmented, jumping between childhood memories and urgent instructions. "The oak tree in the backyard, remember how we built that treehouse? Harrison has the papers. Your mother's jewelry is in the safe deposit box. Key in my desk. Harrison knows. Trust Harrison." I nodded and took notes, unsure what was delirium and what was important information. The night before he died, Dad had a moment of perfect lucidity. He gripped my hand with surprising strength and looked directly into my eyes. "Madison, I need you to forgive me. For Brenda. For the lost years. But know this, I've always loved you more than anything in this world, and I've done everything I could to protect you. Remember that when it seems like I didn't." I held his hand against my cheek, memorizing the feel of it. "There's nothing to forgive, Dad. I love you." He died peacefully the next morning with me on one side of his bed and Brenda on the other. In that moment of profound loss, I thought perhaps grief might bridge the gap between Brenda and me, that we might find common ground in loving and missing the same man. I was wrong. While I sat shell-shocked beside my father's body, Brenda was already on the phone with the funeral director, planning a service that would reflect her taste rather than Dad's wishes. The funeral was exactly as Brenda wanted it. Elaborate floral arrangements Dad would have found excessive, eulogies from her friends who barely knew him. A reception at an upscale hotel rather than the intimate gathering at home that Dad had specified in the notes I'd found in his desk. Throughout the service, Brenda played the part of the devastated widow perfectly, accepting condolences with a practiced balance of dignity and visible grief. Yet I noticed how quickly her expression changed when she thought no one was watching, the tears drying up instantly, the look of calculation returning to her eyes as she assessed the attendees, likely mentally cataloging who would be useful to her moving forward. I stood beside her in the receiving line, accepting hugs from Dad's colleagues and friends, many of whom I hadn't seen in years due to Brenda's systematic isolation of my father. Several whispered to me how glad they were that I had been there for Dad at the end, how much he had always talked about me with pride, even during the years Brenda had kept us apart. Aunt Carol stayed close to me throughout the day, a buffer between me and Brenda's performative grief. "Your father adored you," she reassured me repeatedly. "Never doubt that, no matter what happens next." I didn't understand what she meant by what happens next until 2 days later, when we gathered at Mr. Harrison's office for the reading of the will. Mr. Harrison's office was located in a historic brownstone in downtown Boston, the kind of dignified old building where generations of the city's legal and financial matters had been handled with discretion. The conference room where we gathered featured dark wood paneling, leather chairs, and a massive table that seemed designed to intimidate. I arrived early, wanting a moment to compose myself before facing Brenda again. Mr. Harrison, a tall man in his 60s with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, greeted me with unexpected warmth. "Madison," he said, shaking my hand with both of his. "It's good to finally meet you, though I wish it were under better circumstances. Your father spoke of you often and with great pride." Before I could respond, the door opened and Brenda swept in, dressed in an expensive black suit that screamed wealthy widow rather than grieving wife. She was accompanied by a sharp-featured man carrying a leather portfolio whom she introduced as my attorney, Mr. Daniels. The fact that she'd brought her own lawyer suggested she was expecting something contentious. I glanced at Aunt Carol, who had arrived just after me, and she raised an eyebrow slightly. "Shall we begin?" Mr. Harrison said once we were all seated. He opened a thick folder and cleared his throat. "This is the last will and testament of Richard James Reynolds, revised and signed 6 months ago, with myself and 2 colleagues as witnesses. 6 months ago. Just before Dad's diagnosis, if my timeline was correct." Mr. Harrison began with the standard legal preamble, then moved to the specific bequests. Dad's collection of architectural books to his firm. A generous donation to the Cancer Research Foundation established in my mother's name. His vintage car to his oldest friend from college. Then came the items that mattered most. To my daughter, Madison Elizabeth Reynolds, I leave my personal effects, including photographs, my architectural drafting tools, and the family albums. I felt my stomach drop. Personal effects? That's all? Additionally, to Madison, I leave a cash bequest of $50,000. $50,000 was generous under normal circumstances, but given my father's wealth and our family history, it felt like an afterthought. I could feel Brenda's smirk without even looking at her. The remainder of my estate, Mr. Harrison continued, including all real property, financial accounts, investments, and business interests, I leave to my wife, Brenda Campbell Reynolds. The words hit me like physical blows. The house, my childhood home, my grandparents' legacy, the place my father had promised would someday be mine to care for, was now Brenda's, along with everything else that defined my father's life and work. How could he do this? After all his mysterious comments about making things right, after all his hints about arrangements and instructions to meet with Harrison, I must have made some small sound of distress, because Aunt Carol reached over and gripped my hand tightly. "Are there any questions?" Mr. Harrison asked, looking directly at me with an unreadable expression. Brenda's attorney spoke up. "Everything seems quite straightforward. My client is satisfied with the terms." I bet she was. In the space of 10 minutes, Brenda had gone from a moderately successful real estate agent to a multimillionaire with significant property holdings. "Madison?" Mr. Harrison prompted. "Any questions?" I wanted to scream, to demand explanations, to ask how my father could have betrayed not just me, but the generations of Reynolds who had preserved our family home. Instead, I managed a stiff no. "No questions." "Very well," Mr. Harrison said. "There are papers to sign regarding the transfer of assets. Brenda, my assistant, has those ready in the next room. Madison, if you could stay behind for a moment, there are some details regarding your father's personal effects that we need to discuss." Brenda rose, triumphant. "Take all the time you need to discuss knickknacks," she said. "I have more pressing matters to attend to, like deciding what color to paint the living room. I'm thinking white, to brighten up all that dreary woodwork." She swept out with her attorney, leaving me stunned and shaking with both grief and anger. As soon as the door closed behind them, Mr. Harrison's formal demeanor changed. He quickly crossed to a sideboard, poured a glass of water, and brought it to me. "Drink this," he instructed gently. "And then listen very carefully. All is not as it appears, Madison. I took the water automatically, my mind still reeling. What do you mean? She got everything. The house, the money, everything he worked for. Not exactly, he said, his voice lowered conspiratorially. He reached into an inner pocket of his suit jacket and withdrew a small envelope. Your father asked me to give you this privately after the formal reading. And he asked me to tell you that you must meet me tomorrow at 10 a.m. at the Blackbird Cafe on Charles Street. Come alone, tell no one. I took the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a note in my father's handwriting. Madison, what you heard today is not the full story. Harrison will explain everything tomorrow. Trust him completely. Remember what I told you. Things aren't always what they seem. I've made arrangements. I love you more than anything. Dad. I looked up at Mr. Harrison, confused hope beginning to replace my despair. I don't understand. You will, he promised. Tomorrow. For now, play along. Let Brenda believe she's won. It's what your father wanted. As I drove away from the attorney's office, I glanced in my rearview mirror at the house that had been my home, the house I thought I'd never see again except as a visitor at Brenda's mercy. I watched her go inside, already on her phone, likely sharing the news of her windfall with friends. Later that evening, as I sat in Aunt Carol's guest room trying to make sense of the day's events, I received a text from a high school friend who still lived in the neighborhood. Just drove by your house. There's a coming soon sign from Brenda's real estate company in the front yard. Is your dad selling? My dad wasn't selling. My dad was gone. And Brenda wasn't wasting any time claiming her prize and turning it into cash. The Blackbird Cafe was a small, unassuming establishment tucked between a bookstore and a florist on Charles Street. It was the kind of place locals treasured and tourists overlooked, with mismatched furniture and the best scones in Boston. Dad and I used to come here on Saturday mornings when I was in high school. I arrived 15 minutes early, too anxious to wait any longer at Aunt Carol's. I chose a table in the back corner, positioned so I could see both the entrance and the emergency exit, a habit from my years living in San Francisco. At precisely 10 o'clock, Mr. Harrison appeared, carrying a weathered leather briefcase that looked like it had accompanied him through decades of legal practice. He ordered coffee for both of us before sitting down across from me. Thank you for coming, Madison, he said, his formal tone contrasting with the casual setting. What I'm about to share with you was planned meticulously by your father over the past year. He wanted to protect you, but he needed to protect himself as well, at least until the end. Protect himself from Brenda, I said. It wasn't a question. Harrison nodded. Your father realized, too late I'm afraid, the true nature of his second marriage. By the time he understood what Brenda was, he was already trapped in ways that made a simple divorce complicated. What do you mean, complicated? Dad had all the money, all the power in that relationship. Harrison smiled sadly. Power isn't always about money, Madison. Brenda had gathered quite a collection of compromising information on your father. Business decisions that, taken out of context, could have been portrayed as unethical. Private struggles after your mother's death that could have damaged his reputation. Nothing illegal, nothing truly wrong, but enough that a vindictive ex-wife could have destroyed the firm he'd built over 30 years. I thought about the changes in my father over the years of his marriage to Brenda, how he'd become more withdrawn, more cautious, less the bold and principled man I'd grown up admiring. So he stayed with her, even though he knew she was toxic. He did. But about 18 months ago, he came to me with a plan. He suspected his health was declining, though he hadn't yet received the formal diagnosis. He wanted to ensure that Brenda would be provided for, as he had promised in their marriage vows, but he was determined that she would not be the one to inherit the Reynolds family home. Harrison opened his briefcase and removed a thick folder. Your father created an irrevocable trust 3 years before he married Brenda. At that time, he transferred ownership of the house to the trust, with himself as the beneficiary during his lifetime and you as the successor beneficiary upon his death. My mind was racing to keep up. But at the will reading yesterday, the will dealt with assets in your father's name at the time of his death. The house was not among those assets, though Brenda never realized this. Your father maintained the fiction that he owned the house, paying for all maintenance and taxes from his personal accounts. The trust arrangement was buried in legal documents that Brenda, despite her business acumen, never thought to investigate. He handed me the folder. These are copies of all the relevant documents. The house is yours, Madison. It has been, legally speaking, since the moment your father died. Brenda has been living there as an unwitting guest for the past week. I opened the folder with trembling hands. There it was in black and white, the Reynolds Family Trust, with me named as trustee and beneficiary. Additional documents showed the transfer of the house to the trust dated 3 years before Dad and Brenda's wedding. But why the charade yesterday? Why let me believe, even for a day, that I'd lost everything? Harrison's expression turned grave. Your father knew Brenda would fight any direct bequest to you. He feared she might challenge the will, drag you through painful litigation, perhaps even damage the property out of spite if she knew she couldn't have it. He wanted her to reveal her true intentions, which she's done rather spectacularly by immediately putting the house on the market. He reached into his briefcase again and withdrew a sealed envelope. Your father left this for you as well. He asked that I give it to you only after explaining the trust arrangement. The envelope contained a letter written in my father's distinctive architect's handwriting, precise block letters that had labeled so many blueprints over the years. My dearest Madison, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and Harrison has explained the trust arrangement to you. I hope you can forgive the deception. I couldn't bear the thought of Brenda destroying our family home or using it to manipulate you after I was gone. I realized too late the mistake I made in marrying her. By the time I understood who she truly was, I was trapped by circumstances I won't burden you with. But I would not, allow my mistake to rob you of your birthright. The trust arrangement was created before Brenda came into my life, and I kept it hidden from her throughout our marriage. The Reynolds house is yours now, as it always should have been. I know I've disappointed you in many ways these past years. I let Brenda come between us when I should have fought harder to keep you close. Please know that not a day went by when I didn't think of you, miss you, and feel pride in the remarkable woman you've become. What you do with the house now is entirely your decision. Keep it, sell it, renovate it. The choice is yours. But I wanted you to be the one to decide its fate, not Brenda. There is one more thing. In the master bedroom, behind the reproduction of Monet's water lilies that Brenda insisted on hanging, ghastly thing, there is a small wall safe. The combination is your birthday. Inside you'll find your mother's jewelry, which I managed to hide before Brenda could modernize those two, along with some family papers I thought you might want to preserve. I love you, Madison. More than you could ever know. I hope that in protecting this piece of our family history for you, I've begun to make amends for the years we lost. All my love. Dad. Tears streamed down my face as I finished reading. Mr. Harrison discreetly passed me a handkerchief. What happens now? I asked when I could speak again. Now, Harrison said with a small, satisfied smile, we wait for Brenda to attempt to sell property she doesn't own. I've already alerted the title company that will handle any closing. They're aware of the trust's existence, but have been instructed not to reveal anything until Brenda actually attempts to complete a sale. So she's listing a house she doesn't own? I asked, beginning to understand the elegance of my father's plan. Exactly. She can show it, accept offers, even sign a purchase agreement. But when it comes time to transfer title, she'll discover she has no legal right to do so. The house is yours, Madison. It has been all along. I sat back, overwhelmed by this reversal of fortune. Dad knew her so well, knew exactly what she would do. Your father was a brilliant man, Harrison agreed. And he loved you very much. This was his final gift to you, not just the house itself, but the satisfaction of seeing justice done. As we finished our coffee, Harrison provided me with the names of several excellent real estate attorneys who could help me navigate the coming confrontation with Brenda. We agreed that I would continue staying with Aunt Carol for the time being, allowing Brenda to proceed with her plans to sell the house, blissfully unaware of what awaited her. One last thing, Harrison said as we prepared to leave. Your father wanted you to have this regardless of what you decide to do with the house. He handed me a small velvet box. Inside was a key on an antique silver keychain engraved with the letter R. The original key to the front door, Harrison explained. Your great-grandfather had it made when the family first purchased the house. Your father thought you should be the one to hold it now. I closed my hand around the key, feeling its weight and history. Whatever happened next, this small piece of metal represented a connection to my family that Brenda could never sever. The next 3 months required more patience than I knew I possessed. On Harrison's advice, I maintained a low profile, staying with Aunt Carol and focusing on my work, which I was able to do remotely thanks to an understanding boss. Meanwhile, I kept tabs on Brenda's activities through a network of family friends and neighbors who had never warmed to her. Mrs. Peterson, who had lived next door for 40 years, called me weekly with updates. She's thrown out all your father's clothes, Mrs. Peterson reported one week. Had a crew come and just cart everything away. Such a waste. Those beautiful suits. Another time, she's painting everything white. Everything. Even the mahogany paneling in the library. It's a crime against architecture. But the call I'd been waiting for came on a Tuesday afternoon in early spring. There's a for sale sign in the yard, Mrs. Peterson said. And a lockbox on the door. She's listing it with her own company. Asking price is $4.5 million. The house was worth at least that in Boston's market, especially given its history and location. But Brenda wouldn't see a penny of it. I thanked Mrs. Peterson and immediately called Harrison, who confirmed that the listing had appeared in the multiple listing service that morning. Now we wait, he said. Let her find a buyer. Let her get all the way to closing. Then we'll address the matter of actual ownership. I followed the listing online, watching as Brenda hosted an open house that drew dozens of potential buyers. The virtual tour showed rooms I barely recognized, sterile white boxes stripped of character and history. She'd removed built-in bookcases, covered original fireplaces with drywall, and replaced the hand-carved newel post on the main staircase with something sleek and modern. Each change felt like a personal assault. Exactly 2 weeks after listing, the status changed to pending, meaning Brenda had accepted an offer. According to Harrison's sources at the title company, the buyers were a tech executive and his wife relocating from Seattle, prepared to pay the full asking price in cash. That's when Brenda called me. I'd been expecting it. This final twist of the knife. This opportunity to gloat. Madison, she said when I answered, her voice syrupy with false concern. I realized I never told you about the house. What about it? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. I've sold it, she announced triumphantly. I know how attached you were to that old place, but it was just too much house for one person. The new owners are a lovely couple. They're planning to gut the inside completely. Something about open concept and smart home technology. I gripped my phone tighter but maintained my calm. I see. Of course, I did set aside a few of your old things from the attic, she continued, her voice dripping with condescension. Photo albums and such. Nothing valuable, but they might have sentimental worth to you. You can pick them up before closing next week. That's thoughtful of you, I managed. I thought so, she preened. Oh, and Madison? I wanted you to know I sold the house to teach you a lesson about respect. Maybe next time you'll think twice before trying to turn your father against me. My blood boiled at the accusation, as if I'd been the manipulative one in this scenario. The new owners move in next week, she continued, clearly enjoying herself. So, if you want to say goodbye to the place, you should do it soon. Though honestly, you might not recognize it anymore. That's when I allowed myself a small smile, thinking of the documents safely stored in Harrison's office and the key I now wore on a chain around my neck. Good luck with that, I replied simply. What's that supposed to mean? She demanded, her tone shifting from smug to suspicious. Nothing, I said. I'm sure everything will work out exactly as it should. Goodbye, Brenda. I hung up and immediately called Harrison to let him know that closing was scheduled for the following week. He promised to have our legal team ready. Should I be there? I asked. Absolutely, he said. After all, you're the only one who can actually transfer ownership of the property. The week passed in a blur of preparation. Harrison arranged for a court reporter to be present to document the proceedings. We alerted the title company's legal department, who prepared the necessary paperwork to clarify the true ownership. I even had a locksmith make a new set of keys for the front door. The original would remain around my neck, but I might need spares depending on what I decided to do with the house. The morning of the closing, I dressed carefully in a tailored navy suit that projected both professionalism and authority. Aunt Carol drove me to the title company's office, squeezing my hand before I got out of the car. Richard would be so proud of you, she said. Go get your house back. I met Harrison in the lobby, and together we waited until everyone else had arrived before making our entrance. Through the glass doors of the conference room, I could see Brenda holding court, laughing with the real estate agents and the buyers, a professional-looking couple in their 40s. Papers were spread across the large table, pens at the ready. Harrison and I exchanged a glance, and he nodded. It was time. When we walked in, Brenda's smile froze on her face. Madison? What are you doing here? Hello, Brenda, I said calmly. I believe you're trying to sell my house. The conference room at Boston Trust Title Company fell silent as all eyes turned to me. Brenda recovered quickly, her smile tightening into something predatory. Madison is my late husband's daughter, she explained to the confused buyers. She's having some trouble accepting the sale. But I assure you, everything is in order. She turned to me, her voice hardening. This is highly inappropriate. If you wanted to say goodbye to the house, you should have done it earlier. The male buyer, who introduced himself as Jonathan Kelly, looked uncomfortable. Perhaps we should give you a moment to sort this out. That won't be necessary, Harrison interjected smoothly, placing his briefcase on the table. I'm Edward Harrison, attorney for Madison Reynolds. And I'm afraid Mrs. Reynolds is correct. You are indeed attempting to sell property that doesn't belong to you, Ms. Campbell. It's Mrs. Reynolds, Brenda snapped. And the house absolutely belongs to me. Richard left everything to me in his will. We all heard it read. The title company representative, a woman named Ms. Patel who had been quietly observing, spoke up. We have a copy of Mr. Reynolds' will on file, which does indeed leave his estate to his wife, Brenda Campbell Reynolds. The will addresses assets that were in Richard Reynolds' name at the time of his death, Harrison explained, opening his briefcase and withdrawing a folder. However, the property at 47 Beacon Hill Avenue was not among those assets. He handed a document to Ms. Patel. This is the deed transferring ownership of the property to the Reynolds Family Trust, dated May 15, 2016, 3 years before Mr. Reynolds married his second wife. Ms. Patel examined the document carefully, then nodded. This appears to be in order. But I'll need to see the trust documents as well. Harrison produced another set of papers. The trust designates Richard Reynolds as beneficiary during his lifetime, with Madison Reynolds as successor beneficiary upon his death. Madison is also named as trustee. Brenda's face had gone from confidence to confusion to fury in the space of seconds. This is ridiculous. Richard never mentioned any trust to me. He couldn't have done this without my knowledge. On the contrary, Harrison replied calmly. The trust was established long before you entered the picture, Ms. Campbell. Mr. Reynolds had no obligation to inform you of its existence, particularly as it concerned property that was never part of your marital assets. Ms. Patel was reviewing the trust documents with increasing concern. These appear to be legally executed and properly recorded with the county. She turned to her computer, typing rapidly. Yes, here it is in the property records. The last transfer of this property was to the Reynolds Family Trust in 2016. Brenda's real estate agent, a polished woman in an expensive suit, leaned forward. There must be some mistake. We ran title searches before listing the property. You ran a name search for Richard Reynolds, I imagine, Harrison said. But as the property was owned by a trust, not an individual, it wouldn't have appeared in those results. Mrs. Kelly, the female buyer, looked increasingly distressed. What does this mean for our purchase? Ms. Patel sighed. It means that Mrs. Reynolds, Brenda Reynolds, does not have the legal right to sell this property. She is not the owner. This is absurd. Brenda exploded, standing up so abruptly that her chair rolled backward and hit the wall. Richard and I lived in that house for 5 years. I've been paying the property taxes since his death. Using funds from the estate, I imagine, Harrison noted. Funds that were rightfully left to you. But the house itself was never yours to sell. Brenda turned to me, her carefully maintained facade crumbling to reveal the rage beneath. You knew about this. You let me list the house, find buyers, go through this whole process knowing I couldn't sell it. Yes, I said simply, just like you knew the house meant everything to me and still planned to sell it out from under me without a second thought. I'll fight this, she threatened, looking around wildly. I'll contest the trust. Richard wasn't in his right mind when he set this up. He was manipulated. Harrison smiled thinly. The trust was established years before his illness, Ms. Campbell, and it was witnessed by myself and 2 other attorneys, all of whom will testify to Mr. Reynolds' sound mind and clear intentions. But by all means, pursue litigation if you wish. Discovery would be illuminating, I imagine. The implication was clear. Any legal battle would expose whatever compromising information Brenda had used to control my father during their marriage. Brenda's face went white, then red. She turned to her real estate agent. Call my lawyer. Now. While the agent stepped out to make the call, Ms. Patel addressed the Kellys apologetically. I'm very sorry, but we cannot proceed with this closing. The seller does not have legal title to the property. Jonathan Kelly looked understandably upset. We've already given notice on our apartment. We're supposed to move in next week. I felt a pang of sympathy for the couple caught in the middle of this drama. Mr. and Mrs. Kelly, I apologize for the situation. You should know that I have no intention of keeping you from the home you've chosen, if you're still interested. As the actual owner, I would be happy to sell you the property directly. Mrs. Kelly blinked in surprise. You would? Of course. We can discuss terms that would be fair to everyone, except perhaps Ms. Campbell's commission, I added, unable to resist the small dig. Brenda's lawyer arrived within 20 minutes, a different attorney than the one who had accompanied her to the will reading. This one was older, with the harried look of someone called away from important work for an emergency. After reviewing the documents, he pulled Brenda aside for a whispered conference in the corner. I couldn't hear the specific words, but the increasingly desperate tone of Brenda's responses told me all I needed to know. Her lawyer was confirming what Harrison had said. She had no legal claim to the house. When they returned to the table, Brenda's lawyer addressed the room. My client needs time to review her options. We request that all parties suspend any further action regarding this property until we've had a chance to examine these documents more thoroughly. Of course, Harrison agreed smoothly. However, I should note that as of this moment, Miss Campbell is residing in a property owned by Madison Reynolds without permission. MS. Reynolds would be within her rights to demand immediate vacancy. It was a power move, and we all knew it. Legally, I could have Brenda removed from the house immediately. Brenda's lawyer cleared his throat. We would request a reasonable accommodation to allow my client time to relocate. I thought of all the times Brenda had been unreasonable with me, blocking my visits to see my dying father, disposing of family heirlooms without asking, attempting to sell my childhood home out of spite. I could have been equally vindictive now that the power had shifted. Instead, I said, 2 weeks. She can have 2 weeks to pack her things and find new accommodations. But I'll need access to the house starting tomorrow to assess what renovations will be needed before the Kellys can move in. MS. Patel, apparently relieved that we were moving toward resolution rather than litigation, quickly drew up temporary agreements for everyone to sign, acknowledging the true ownership of the property, setting a timetable for Brenda's departure, and establishing preliminary terms for my direct sale to the Kellys. Throughout this process, Brenda sat rigid with fury, signing the papers with such force that she tore through one of them. When the final document was completed, she stood up and addressed me directly. You think you've won, don't you? You have no idea what your father was really like. The things he did, the secrets he kept. He wasn't the saint you think he was. I never thought he was a saint, I replied calmly. He was human. He made mistakes, marrying you being chief among them. But he was a good man who loved his family and tried to protect what mattered. This isn't over, she hissed, gathering her designer purse and coat. Actually, Brenda, it is, I said, standing to face her. The house is mine. Your game is finished. And in 2 weeks, you'll be nothing but an unpleasant memory in our family history. She stormed out, her real estate agent hurrying after her with apologies streaming from her lips. The Kellys remained, looking shell-shocked by the drama they'd witnessed. Does this sort of thing happen often in Boston real estate? Jonathan asked weakly. Harrison chuckled. Only when exceptionally devious people meet exceptionally good planning. We spent the next hour discussing the terms of sale with the Kellys, who were surprisingly understanding once they realized they could still purchase the house they'd fallen in love with, and at a slightly lower price, now that Brenda's commission was out of the equation. As we left the title company, Harrison placed a fatherly hand on my shoulder. Your dad would be proud. You handled that with grace and dignity, more than Brenda deserved, truthfully. I didn't do it for her, I said, fingering the key that still hung around my neck. I did it for Dad. And for myself. Some battles aren't worth fighting, not when you've already won the war. The next day, armed with my original key and the legal documents confirming my ownership, I returned to the house that had been my home for the first 18 years of my life. Brenda's car was gone. Presumably, she was out searching for a new place to live or consulting with her lawyer about non-existent loopholes. I stood on the front steps for a long moment, tracing the familiar pattern of the leaded glass in the door's window. Then I inserted the key that had been in my family for generations, turned it in the lock, and stepped inside to reclaim my birthright. 2 weeks after the showdown at the title company, I stood in the empty foyer of my family home, listening to the echo of the front door closing behind Brenda for the final time. She had departed with as much drama as she'd lived, hiring an excessive number of movers, making pointed comments about items she was generously leaving behind, and finally delivering a sealed envelope that she claimed contained the truth about your father. I had accepted the envelope politely, waited until she was gone, and then promptly dropped it unopened into the fireplace in the library, one of the few original features she hadn't managed to destroy during her redecorating frenzy. Whatever truth Brenda thought would hurt me didn't matter anymore. I had my own truth, confirmed by Dad's actions and his final letter. The house felt simultaneously familiar and foreign. The bones were the same. The grand staircase, the high ceilings, the distinctive crown moldings that had survived Brenda's modernization efforts. But the spirit had been altered by her cold white paint, the removal of built-in bookshelves, and the replacement of antique fixtures with trendy modern alternatives. I had sold the house to the Kellys as promised, but with a contingency that gave me 2 months to live there before they took possession. I needed that time to reconnect with the home, to decide what items to keep, and to oversee the restoration of some of the architectural features Brenda had damaged. My first night alone in the house, I wandered from room to room, reacquainting myself with the spaces that had shaped my childhood. In my old bedroom, now stripped of personality and painted the same sterile white as the rest of the house, I could still see the shadows of where my posters had hung, the slight indentation in the window seat, where I'd spent countless hours reading. I saved the master bedroom for last. It had been my parents' room, then Dad and Brenda's, and I entered it with a mix of reverence and trepidation. Brenda had completely redesigned this space, replacing the warm cherry furniture with sleek gray and chrome pieces, covering the original hardwood floors with white carpet, and, as Dad had mentioned in his letter, hanging an oversized reproduction of Monet's water lilies over the fireplace. I carefully removed the artwork, revealing the wall safe just as Dad had described. My fingers trembled slightly as I entered my birthday, 0629, into the combination lock. The mechanism clicked, and the door swung open. Inside were several velvet jewelry boxes, a thick manila envelope, and a smaller white envelope with my name written in Dad's distinctive handwriting. I opened the white envelope first. My darling Madison, if you're reading this, you've reclaimed your birthright and discovered the safe. Inside you'll find your mother's jewelry, which she always intended for you to have. The sapphire set was her favorite. She wore it the night we got engaged. The manila envelope contains family papers, including the original deed to the house from your great-grandparents' purchase. There are also some of my private journals, which I hope will help you understand the choices I made, both good and bad. I have one last confession, Madison. In the last years of our marriage, as Brenda became more controlling and I became more ill, I began secretly restoring some of the family heirlooms she thought she had disposed of. Look in the attic, behind the chimney access panel. There you'll find the items I managed to save, your mother's favorite books, photographs Brenda removed from albums, the hand-carved music box your grandfather made for you. I couldn't save everything, and for that I'm sorry. But I saved what mattered most. Just as I tried, in my imperfect way, to save what mattered most for you, this house, your inheritance, your future. Live well, Madison. Be happy, and know that wherever I am proud of the woman you've become. All my love, Dad. Tears streamed down my face as I clutched the letter to my chest. Even in his final months, weakened by disease and controlled by Brenda, Dad had been fighting for me in his own quiet way. He hadn't been perfect. His choice to marry Brenda had caused us both pain, but he had done his best to make amends, to protect what he could for me. I opened the jewelry boxes one by one, memories flooding back with each piece. Mom's pearl earrings that she wore to every Christmas Eve service. The delicate gold bracelet Dad had given her on their 10th anniversary. And yes, the sapphire set, a necklace, earrings, and ring that matched Mom's eyes perfectly. The manila envelope contained exactly what Dad had promised, family documents, his personal journals, and photographs I had thought lost forever. I would read the journals eventually, but not yet. Tonight was about reconnection, not diving into Dad's private thoughts. I made my way to the attic, flashlight in hand, and located the chimney access panel. Behind it, just as Dad had described, was a hidden cache of family treasures, items Brenda had discarded or hidden that Dad had secretly recovered and preserved. Mom's dog-eared copy of Pride and Prejudice with her notes in the margins. The family photo albums spanning generations. The music box my grandfather had carved, which still played Somewhere Over the Rainbow when wound. My parents' wedding album. Dad's collection of architectural awards. I spent hours in the attic that night, surrounded by these rescued fragments of my family history, alternately crying and laughing as memories washed over me. By the time I descended the stairs, dawn was breaking and I had made a decision. Over the next 2 months, I threw myself into a careful, selective restoration of the house. I didn't try to erase all of Brenda's changes. Some of her modernizations actually complemented the historic features rather than fighting them. But I restored the library's built-in bookshelves, refinished the hardwood floors she had covered, and reinstalled the antique light fixtures I found carefully wrapped and labeled in the basement. The Kellys visited weekly to discuss the renovations, their initial wariness giving way to genuine enthusiasm as they saw the house's transformation. They had young children who would fill the rooms with laughter again, and they appreciated the blend of historic character and modern amenities I was creating. "We'll preserve the heart of the house," Jonathan promised during their final visit before I moved out. "Our kids will know its history." On my last night in the house, I sat in Dad's study, the one room Brenda had left mostly untouched, perhaps because she rarely entered it. I had packed the items I was keeping: Mom's jewelry, the family photographs and documents, Dad's architectural tools, and a few pieces of furniture with special significance. The rest would stay with the house, part of its continuing story. I felt a profound sense of peace sitting in Dad's leather chair, surrounded by his books and the subtle scent of his pipe tobacco that somehow lingered years after he'd given up smoking. The house had been reclaimed, not just from Brenda but from the grief and distance that had separated Dad and me during his marriage. Through his final act of love and protection, he had restored our connection even after death. The lesson wasn't lost on me. Dad had made mistakes. We all do. He had allowed fear and manipulation to separate him from those he loved most. But in the end, he had found the courage to make amends, to protect what mattered, to ensure that justice would eventually prevail. I had learned that patience sometimes serves justice better than immediate confrontation. That playing the long game, as Dad had done with his secret trust arrangement, can be more effective than impulsive reaction. That forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or excusing, but rather freeing yourself from the burden of bitterness. Most importantly, I had learned that family legacy isn't just about houses or possessions. It's about values passed down, lessons learned, love expressed even imperfectly. Dad had preserved our family home for me, yes. But more precious was the example he'd set through his final acts, showing me that it's never too late to try to make things right. As the first light of dawn filtered through the study windows, I rose from Dad's chair and took one last look around. I wouldn't be living here anymore, but I had reclaimed what mattered: my heritage, my memories, my peace of mind. And Brenda's attempt to erase all of that had ultimately failed. Sometimes justice comes in unexpected ways. Sometimes the most powerful response to cruelty isn't dramatic confrontation, but quiet, methodical planning. Sometimes winning doesn't mean destroying your opponent, but simply taking back what is rightfully yours and moving forward with grace. As I closed the front door behind me for the final time, I felt Dad's presence beside me, his hand symbolically on my shoulder. "We did it, Dad," I whispered. "We showed her that some things can't be bought, sold, or stolen. Some things are protected by love. What about you? Have you ever had to deal with someone trying to take something that was rightfully yours? How did you handle it?" I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this tale of family justice satisfied something in your soul, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of people standing up for themselves in the face of injustice. Remember to share with anyone who might need a reminder that sometimes the good guys really do win in the end. Thank you for listening, and remember, patience and planning often triumph over greed and manipulation.